Hello, welcome again to another of the 10 questions beyond us. As I get the opportunity now to interview, much like I did for the 10 questions with Trinity, I get to interview some of my friends. So other brothers that are in the ministry as well, and they get a chance to talk about some of their favorite verses. So I'll let our guests introduce ourselves. I know who he is, but you may not know. So I'll start with that first question. Who are you?
Well, I am Reverend Jonathan Sharp. I'm the associate pastor at Trinity Lutheran Church in Springfield, Illinois. Uh, I've been a pastor for all of 6 months, so I know absolutely everything there is.
You
Just
are, I think, as far as in ministry, the most recently entering the ministry individual that I have talked to on this. So you've earned that title, uh,
do I
along
get a
with being
badge?
the yeah. I'll mock something up and I'll send it to you.
Thank
Along with being the Mary Doc Randy Buck to my Peregrine Took. Uh, I was gonna go with Legolas and Gimli, but I figured we'd fight over who gets to be Gimli. Uh,
you.
so what was the
That's
safer
acceptable.
option?
Yes,
uh,
we are
so
rather
you've been in
hostile.
ministry, yeah. Been in ministry for 6 months, and you chose a passage out of the Old Testament. So what passage did you choose for us to look at this morning?
Yeah. So I picked Genesis chapter 15 verses 1 to 6. This is really just a fantastic 6 verses of
Yeah,
God dealing with Abram. And it's one we kind of we forget about because we're all about, the call of Abram,
mm-hmm.
Sarah and Hagar, the binding of Isaac. But this one I think is possibly the most important of the entire Abraham narrative, aside from the binding of Isaac.
Yeah. I I mean, it's it's something that I know. This text is one that I know and I'm familiar with, but you're right. We kind of skip over it. We go Abram's call, the dalliance with Hagar, the birth of Ishmael, and even that we kind of sometimes pass over, and we get straight into Isaac and the sacrifice. And so here though, I think this is such a great verse. So I've got it. I'll read our passage. So after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue I like the little subnote there that a variance translation is instead of continue childless, I shall die childless. And the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus. And Abram said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir, your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and number the stars if you are able to number them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. So shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. So why did you pick this verse? I know you said that it's a beautiful verse, and it is, but what led you to pick this specific excerpt from the call of Abram?
Yeah, so couple of reasons. Number one, this is God's covenant with Abram, who will be
Mm-hmm.
Abraham.
Right.
I'm just going to say Abraham for the rest of the interview.
I'm cool with that. Yeah.
This is God's covenant. This is where he's making the promise to him that his own flesh and blood are going uh, to be the nation which will come from him.
Right.
Uh, and then it has this fantastic connection to both the Gospels and the epistles.
Right.
You have Jesus talking about is talking to the religious leaders, and they're like, we're descendants of Abraham. We've never been enslaved to
Mm-hmm.
anyone. And what does Jesus say?
I that passage that you just referenced, it always makes me chuckle because I know that they're probably not forgetting this, and it's but it always says, what about those that time in Egypt? Did you forget about that? Did you forget about Babylonian captivity? Did you forget about the exile, all of these things happened, and yet your heritage is your foundation, and not verse 6, that the faith credited to him as righteousness.
Yeah.
I think that there's great joy in this passage.
Hmm.
And so I'm really glad that you picked this, because it's an opportunity to look at God's words. He doesn't say much, but what he says is prolific. So without getting too heavy on the things that I find so beautiful about this, let's get into our next question. Who is the enemy that you see in this text? So if we talk about the enemies, we always think of the three, right? Sin, death, and the devil. Which ones do we see play out here, or that you see?
So I'm seeing sin as the enemy here, and it is
Right.
sin manifesting as doubt.
That's exactly what I thought too.
Yeah, because I mean, Abraham is here saying, "Hey, I'm going to die without a kid. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, God?" And this seems to be his kind of his MO. This is
Right.
his sort of personal sin. This is prevalent sin where he's just always doubting God's promises, uh, or that God will protect him.
Yeah. And I think that that's exactly it. We think about Abraham being, the father of the great people, right? And that's true, because he is, but he's also a perpetual doubter. I don't know exactly how long it had been from Genesis 12 until this passage,
Mhm.
um, but it hadn't ultimately really been all that long. I mean, realistically, we're talking a matter of a few years,
Yeah.
if that, like absolute max 2 or 3 years, and and for him to have already forgotten the promises that God made, right? That threefold promise of making His name great, being a great nation, and blessing those who bless you, curse those who curse you, right? And so in my religion class, I always cover the part of Genesis 12 right after that, where they go into Egypt. And we already see Abram's doubt playing into account there, that when he lies and deceives Pharaoh and says that Sarai is his sister and not his wife, because he fears for his life. And the fact that he doesn't trust the God who just made these great promises to him to keep him, right? And here we see that play out again, that he's like, Eleazar of Damascus is going to be my heir. God, where's this promise that you made? Where's the fulfillment of this? And I think it's important that there's a book out there. I think it's Broken Heroes, or something along those lines, that CPH published, and it highlights these things of heroes of the faith, right? The names listed in the Hall of Fame chapter of Hebrews 11, and how even then they also messed up, that they also fell short, and Abraham, he doubted, and we see after this how he continues to doubt even after this covenant gets cut, which we could talk about that when we get to the what comes next, because I've got a lot of stuff to talk about with that cutting the covenant.
Yeah.
But yeah, the enemy is sin, and the self, the reliance on the self, I think, is also part of it. That Abram, he's trying to give God these options almost, like, well, Eleazar of Damascus, I guess, is going to be my heir, and that's going to be the way that XYZ happens. Or later with Hagar, where he's like, well, look, I got a son this way, and not letting God be God.
He gives God the choices of A, Eleazar, B, Ishmael, but God has the hidden C in
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's that's exactly it. And so thinking about for us, we look to the heroes of the faith, and the faith credited as righteousness, right? That's not something that Abraham was involved in. Like, that's something that he simply was given. Um, and even then, his faith, it wavered at times.
Yeah.
It wasn't always the faith that was strong and confident. And I think for me, that brings a little bit of comfort that, you know, Abraham, who walked with God, who spoke with God, that if he even doubted, what, it opens the door then for that comfort of restoration, because God didn't exile Abram after he doubted. No, he gave him the confidence to continue on, and he gave him his love and his forgiveness. Um, so we
And
got the
I
enemy of sin. Oh, go ahead.
think that really points to sort of God, the relational aspect of God that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when his children are doubting, he comes with arms of comfort.
Yes.
He's patient and long suffering, and it's like, he doesn't like, oh, you doubt me once, kick it.
Right. No. And that's the thing is, and it's that patience and that long suffering, like you just said, that it's was it 74 years from the time God makes the promise until Isaac is born.
Hmm.
Um, I may have the number exactly off a little bit, but it's something somewhere in the 74-75 year range.
Yeah.
And the fact that is the way that God works, that it's not instant,
Hmm.
can cause us to struggle, but also maybe brings us confidence and peace, knowing that, like you just said, that it's not the one time mistake. That He is a long suffering God, and so that our doubt, our sins are still forgiven because of His love and His patience for us. Um, so let's talk about sin and the enemy of sin and the defeating of that enemy. How do you see the enemy defeated in this text?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's God defeating the enemy as he always does. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but particularly here, it's with his words of reassurance. It's
Yeah.
that he's giving Abraham that confidence, that hope, that promise that Abraham's heir is his own flesh, will come
Right.
from his loins, will be his own flesh and blood son. And this is wonderful because it's God's word doing the work.
Yes.
And God says it, and he believes, and
Mm-hmm.
it's counted to him as righteousness.
And I think that's it. That it's not by Abraham's work. It's not by any one thing that he does, but it's
Mhm.
by everything that God does that this enemy of sin is defeated. I know we're getting a little outside of our appointed text for our study, but you look at the how God backs this promise up, this covenant, the cutting of the covenant, like that should be the reminder to us that God, He takes these promises that He makes very seriously. Um, I was
Well,
glancing through my notes, and I think it's a thing that even then, when Abram doesn't keep this promise, his children also don't always behave perfectly. I mean, Isaac, I think, has probably the shortest rap sheet of them, but I mean, then Jacob and Esau, and Jacob and his sons, this whole thing that plays out, the sons of the father continue to play out for the generations after. But God still is there with His children, still there with His people, not to judge, not to cut them off, but to restore them, to bring healing and protection. And so really for me, the way the enemy is defeated is God's love. Is that
absolutely. Well, and this is one another reason why I picked this text is this is sort of God's first step in fulfilling that first gospel
yeah.
promise he made to Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
You're right. That this is I was watching some stuff in preparation for this. Kind of just uh, to do some last minute kind of 1,000 foot view
yeah.
uh, study. Got 2 pages of notes already, but I was like, I want to know like more about the context and stuff. Now I'm reading through it. I'm watching some videos, kind of summarizing Genesis. Um, it was really cool to hear. I think it was Bible Project had one that they break it into 2 parts, and they view the first 11 chapters of Genesis as God's relationship with the world.
Hmm.
And then from Genesis 12 on, it's the story of God's relationship with a very specific person. It's intimate connection with Abraham and his children. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and and I think that's what we see here is that, we continue to be a part of that intimate relationship with God and Abraham's children, even though, we may not be of the same lineage as Abraham. We're grafted into the family through the waters of baptism, and those promises are for us as well.
yeah. Well, and you talk about the stars, man. This line here,
Right.
look toward heaven and number the stars. If you are able to number them, so shall your offspring be.
Mm-hmm.
And take a moment and step back and think, one of those stars was lit for you.
Mm, that's
Ooh,
beautiful. I hadn't even made that thought, but that's such a great way of putting it.
I mean, even here, one of those stars was lit for me. That even here in Genesis, talking to Abraham, God is already, you know,
He's already, viewing and thinking on the sense of thousands of years later that these things are true for you and for me.
the the,
Um,
the, the universal grace that pours out
yeah, yeah,
uh, for all who believe, not just for the
hmm,
descendants of Abraham, because God can
yeah,
make descendants of Abraham from stones,
yeah,
from
and
Gentiles like you and me.
yeah, yeah. But that's the thing is that one of the things I emphasized in my notes was God speaks in rhetorical questions, and almost in a similar but different way to
Mhm.
how he speaks to Job. I've been really reading through Job a lot, and the last couple chapters, I call them the God sunning Job chapters. Where were you? Were you there? Did you do this? Did you do that? And here it's in Job, it's to kind of chastise him a little bit, but also to bring him comfort. Here, it's simply to kind of bring comfort. That if you can number the stars, that's going to be how great your descendants are. That you who are childless, you who are whose wife is considered barren, which you know getting into all of the different things that brings with it in the context of the Old Testament. The shame that brought. That we have a God who covers shame, who creates a miracle out of that shame in a weird way. Kind of. What I want to find my actual notes. Um, uh, an inverse. That's what I would call it. An inverse of the virgin birth, where there it was one who should not be with child was with child. Here it's another who is unable to be with child yet is with child, and we have a God who creates miracles out of nothing for you and for me. I mean, that's the thing is it, even all the way back to creation. I mean that he created not for not for some random reason, but for us that he created.
Well, it's for the
And
sake of joy and love.
yeah,
Like God created all of this for us to enjoy his creation, to enjoy and dwell in his love.
right.
Like, how cool
It's
is that?
it's yeah, and I think that's the thing that we can so easily lose is
Hmm.
it's for us
Yeah.
that his love is for us that we have this promise for you. Um, so the point of view, you and I read a lot of the same stuff. We always have a point of view character.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whose point of view, who's the one that we bring ourselves into in this text?
I mean, there's two actors in this text, so yeah. And I think
50-50, and
if
one of
you,
them's God. So
yeah, if you take God's point of view, then maybe we should have a talk.
right in this instance especially. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'll let you take the floor with that answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So well, Abraham, of course, but I take the point of view of the stars because
Yeah.
that
Oh, that's an interesting.
um because I don't know, it just this verse particularly has verse 5 has always stuck out to me.
Hmm.
It's always been so impactful. Um,
Right.
but yeah, Abraham, of course,
Right.
because we're just like him. We
Yeah.
see God working. We see him continuing to care for us, to bless us, and
Mhm.
we're still like, hey God, what's the deal? Why aren't you taking care of me and blessing me?
Yeah. And we sometimes we want to be blessed differently, you know. Like I echo Abram's words here because he's at that point in his life where he doesn't know what's next.
Yeah,
That he's been given these promises, but the promises aren't being fulfilled the way that he wants them to be. And that's the thing, is that we've been given these promises too, right? You know, but they're not always fulfilled the way we want. And do we look for the quick and easy fulfillment of them, or
yes,
do
that's
we look for
100%
God?
what we do.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Repeat that.
Yes, that's 100% what we do. We go for the quick and easy fulfillment.
Yeah, but that's not what God would have us do. That's the
Exactly.
like that's the thing that stands out to me, is that we we fall into the same trap.
Hmm.
And this is why I say that the devil doesn't have to create new sins, because
No.
Abraham is falling into these things thousands of years ago, and it's still the same thing that we suffer from and we deal with. And thanks be that we have a God who is gracious and loving and long patient with us. So that does bring us then our next question. This text tells us a lot about our God. So what are some of the things that you see really standing out as far as who our God is?
Yeah, so really, I've kind of got three things, and of course, they're all related.
Mm-hmm.
One, God is faithful. He
Yeah.
remembers his promises. Two, he will do things and fulfill them in his timing. And because God is faithful, because God fulfills his promises, he justifies us by our faith in him keeping his promises.
Yeah. I echo all of those things. I also have written here, we have a God who does the impossible.
Yeah,
That we have a God who does the impossible uh, for us. Um, we have a God who is huge, who is enormous, who hung the stars and numbered them, and yet is so small and intimate that he knit us together in our mother's wombs. That juxtaposition of who our God is that he is immense and yet so small and personal.
personal. That I was about to, I want to really hone in on that.
Yeah.
Personal. Uh, if you want to think about contrasting uh, our God, the creator, with
Mm.
other mythological gods.
Right.
Uh, the mythological gods are always just sort of these beings, these creatures, because they are always part of creation.
Right.
You know, but they are beings
Mm.
who are so far beyond human understanding that people are just they're making sacrifices to try to appease them, just so that,
Yeah.
okay, Zeus, don't throw the thunderbolt at me this time. Here's your sacrifice. But our
Yeah.
God is a personal God, a God
Mm-hmm.
whom every individual has a personal connection to, a private phone line.
Yeah. and
Uh,
and I think that this is the second uh
you broke up
that
there
I
for a
did.
minute.
The connection to John. Oh, sorry. No, I'm just saying this is the second of these recordings that I'm doing right now. The
Mhm.
second of this batch. And the first one, I also made the connection that I'm going to make here is this calls to mind John 1:14, that like you said, the personal God that we have. Not that he's a personal Jesus, that he's a genie in a bottle, but that he became like us, who put on our flesh, dwelt among us. Why? because he loves us, because he is a God who, like I said, does the impossible.
Mhm.
And that is amazing, is that his love is an irrational love. It is a, I'm gonna be a little hokey. It's a reckless love, right? That it but that's what it it's a sacrificial love that he shows, because if you think about Abraham, right, that
Yeah.
and maybe this is where we should go, is the where do we go from here question, but
Uh,
we got to do the how did we get here first, so I'm going to pause.
okay.
But you think about what he promises Abraham. That is a reckless thing to promise. That is a crazy thing to promise, and yet he promises it and fulfills it. So we'll get to the cutting a covenant, because you and I both had the same classes. We got all the gory details about that. Let's do the how did we get here first.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to take two steps back. Uh,
Sounds good.
so uh, before this, you've got the situation where Abraham has to go and rescue Lot from being captured after
Mm-hmm.
uh, after Sodom and Gomorrah had been sacked.
Yep.
And so, and this is cool too, because it puts Abraham in a light we don't think about, because he gets 318 strong trained men of war.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham is a chieftain
Yeah.
in a very real and literal sense. And so he goes with 318, using just beautiful strategy and tactics, attacking by night to rescue his nephew Lot, and then he brings he brings back the spoils of war, which takes us to our next step, which is Abraham encountering Melchizedek,
Yeah.
a
That's
priest of the Most High God, which is our God.
yeah.
And Abraham shows this beautiful humility here, because he recognizes Melchizedek, who Hebrews will talk about as Jesus being of the a priest of the order of Melchizedek.
Right.
But you have Abraham, who tied the spoils of battle
Mm-hmm.
to a prophet, priest, and king of God.
It's so funny. Melchizedek is kind of this. Uh, he's such a weird individual, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just this is it. This is like the only
Yeah.
time he shows. He's kind of to borrow from something you and I know a lot of. He's kind of Tom Bombadil-ish.
Yeah.
That he shows up, he has this great interaction, and then he goes on his way. He's vitally important to the success of the story, right? He's vitally important to the journey that takes place, but he's not ever mentioned again.
He's mentioned just kind of offhand, like at the
Yeah,
Council of Elrond. Hey, what about Tom Bombadil?
right.
And Gandalf's like, no, he's silly.
Yeah,
He's a
but
Monty
that's the
Python.
thing is, I'm going to go back even further with the how did we get here,
Okay.
because I want to take us all the way back to the fall. We can do that without getting super long winded right now, right? Because we're still in Genesis, right? You
I
have
don't know
the
that we can. I
you
don't know
don't
that
have the fall of you have the fall of humanity from their perfected unity with God, and then you have the continued falling short. You have the first murder there with Cain. You have the world being destroyed in the flood, save for 8 people, and then from that you have the rise of this world basically of pagans. Amongst them is Abram. I think that's something that's easily forgotten, because we think of Abraham as the patriarch, Father Abraham, but he was a pagan. He had no knowledge of the one true God until God made himself known to Abraham,
Mhm.
and from there he receives that threefold promise: make
Yeah.
your name great, make you a great nation, and bless those who bless those. bless you, curse those who curse you, right? Those three promises are given to a pagan, a childless pagan who was rich, right? He had a lot going for him,
Yeah.
but he gave up all of that. He journeyed into this land that was not of his father. He
Mhm.
journeyed into this foreign land because God told him to.
Well, and think about when, he brought Lot with him, his nephew,
Yeah,
and they come to the land and they split it.
yeah,
And he lets Lot take the richer part.
yeah. That was I was just about to make that connection too. That his and this is where it's not fair to Abraham to only highlight his doubting because he had a lot of faith as well.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but it's just those moments where he doubts. It's like, but you were so close. You had it. You had it in your grasp, and then
And that brings the humanity to it, to the
yes,
to the story though. And that's where we see
mm-hmm.
ourselves. Because
Right.
maybe we can't see ourselves in the the great acts of faith in Abraham, but we can
But we
see
see
it,
ourselves.
see ourselves here.
Yes.
Where even though we've seen God working, we and recognize it, we've thanked him.
Yeah.
It's you know that Peter is my favorite of the apostles.
Yes. Yes.
It's because he's such a screw up.
Yes. It's for the same reason I always bring up.
He's the guy who, in the middle of walking on water, in the middle of a miracle happening,
Right?
he
He gets
doubts.
distracted. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and
So yeah, and that's the thing is that that's part of I think why viewing these heroes of the faith, right, as humans, because that's what they were. It
yeah,
gives us that opportunity, right? We can think about well all the great things they did, but we gotta remember that they were just like you and I and that they faltered, they failed.
yeah,
Um and
yeah.
so
They were virtuous people.
mhm,
Oh, they lived to embody their faith and the virtues of God, but they still fell short.
yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah.
just want to take a quick minute to distract. Right
No, no
now,
problem.
I'm working my way through the Book of Virtues, which is a compilation of, I don't know, like 1,000 different excerpts
Uh-huh.
from literature, the Bible, history, on sort of like these 10 virtues for life.
Right.
And it's self-discipline, compassion, responsibility, friendship, work, courage, perseverance, honesty, loyalty, and faith. And these things are important uh, because the law is important because it gives us our guidelines
Right.
as we strive to live out our faith, live as virtuous Christians, virtuous
Mm-hmm.
people. Uh, and that's the thing is if you live like a Christian, you're pretty much going to guaranteed to like be
but
virtuous.
but but that's the thing is that even with that, even knowing that the law is of vital importance, we still fall short, and that's where the gospel comes in, right?
And that's
When
where
we
we
know that
need
we've
the
fallen
gospel.
short and we need the gospel, and
Yeah.
so let's talk about where we go from here, right? Immediately after this, um, God cuts the covenant with Abraham, and
Yeah.
I've been very intentional about using that word "cutting a covenant." That's how it literally translates in the Hebrew is you cut a covenant because the custom actually involved cutting things up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's blood that makes a covenant.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, it's literally here we have uh God says, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all these, cut them in half, and laid each half over against the other. But he did not cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram. And
Yeah.
behold, dreadful and great darkness continuing on. But yeah, it's literally like blood is being shed to
Hmm.
solidify, to seal this covenant.
And so my understanding of this practice is basically a way of ensuring that your word is kept.
Hmm.
That you're essentially saying by walking in between. That was part of it was you walked in between these two cut up halves.
Yeah.
That you're saying, let it be done so to me if
Hmm.
I do not uphold my end of the bargain.
Yeah.
That you are saying to the individual you are cutting this covenant with
Hmm.
that I am as good as a cut up lamb or a goat or a cow or a pig or whatever.
Hmm.
They wouldn't have used pigs. Pigs are unclean. But you're as good as
Well,
any
leather
cut up
meat.
animal. If if you if I break this word, and
Hmm.
here's the like twist, right? There's always a twist with God, and this is kind of one of those irony moments, is that uh, he kept his word and still suffered the fate as if he had broken it.
Yeah.
In that the blood of Christ is the new covenant, right? It's literally what we say is this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. That even though God kept his part of the covenant perfectly, and it's us who have fallen short,
Hmm.
God takes that punishment upon himself and gives us his son's blood as a new covenant,
He
as this
used his
new,
own blood to seal the covenant of faith.
yes, yes. And we made reference to it that even after this, right? If anything should have removed any sort of doubt from Abram, it's the fact that God said, "Look, I'm walking in between these halves of this animal with you, and I'm because Abraham doesn't have to do anything. That's the thing in this covenant that gets me is it's not an agreement. It's not a trade agreement where they both give up something. Abraham simply receives and God gives, and
Mhm.
and so we see that, and then again, God isn't answering Abraham's prayers in the way that Abraham wants. So like you said earlier, so beautifully, he gives God, Abraham that is, gives God option A, option B, and that's it. And we see his sin, his pride, his doubt creep in. We see the birth of Ishmael, the provision even then of a loving God for Ishmael. We see Isaac, and the this is what gets me though, because I want to talk about the strong faith of Abraham, right?
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that Abraham received this promise. It was finally fulfilled, and then God tells him to sacrifice Isaac, and he does it. Well, he goes to do it. He doesn't
He's
bring the knife
about
down.
to. He's about to before the
That
Malak
yes,
comes and like puts a stop to it.
mm-hmm.
Um,
And then we see how Abraham kind of being this type, not of Christ necessarily, but this type for humanity as a whole.
mhm.
That that we fall short, and yet God
Yeah.
still loves us. And Hebrews 11, the Hall of Faith passage. That
Mhm.
I carry this coin. I don't know if it'll focus or not. There we go. I
There
carry
you
this coin in my pocket with me every day. It has Hebrews 11 verse 1
go. Okay.
written on the back of the coin. It's something I bring with me everywhere because I have to fidget. I have to have something that I can fidget with.
Yeah.
But this is a reminder, that is faith, right? Faith is the assurance of things hoped for the conviction of things not seen. For by the people of old received their commendations. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that it was seen, so that what is seen, was not made out of things that are visible. And Abraham's faith credited to him as righteousness. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Right? It's by faith that all of these things come to be. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is faith is active,
Hmm.
but also passive. If
Right.
that makes any sense at all. It operates both, right? In faith we act and we do these things, but the faith that we have is one that is given. We believe that we cannot believe. The meaning of the third article of the creed, right? That I cannot by my own reason believe in Jesus Christ, my Lord, but rather by the gifts of the Holy Spirit have been given faith through the waters of baptism.
Well, to put it another way, in the way that David Maxwell puts it, you got the faith that believes and the faith that is believed.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the faith that believes is that faith given to us by the Holy Spirit through the Word,
Right.
through baptism, through Holy Communion, and then the faith that is believed, that active living, that active faith of, okay, God, this is what you're calling me for.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess I'll take my
And
one and only son up to the mountain.
mm-hmm. that look that and even then I this is something that I've come across here lately. It's really standing out to me that Abraham's words to the servant, you stay here, for the boy and I are going up to the mountain and we shall return.
Yes.
That I don't know what he meant by that, but he knew that somehow he and Isaac were both coming back down that mountain. Whether or not that was going to be God raising him from the dead, God providing, I don't know what he meant, but he knew something was going to happen, that Isaac was coming down that mountain with him.
Because he knew that Isaac was the promised son. He
Mm-hmm.
knew that God had promised that through Isaac,
Yeah.
that
And
that he cut back in chapter 15 where we're at. It'd be through
yeah.
Isaac that it comes to fruition. And so
And then you yeah. And
it's
part
that
of that
ultimate
is the
trust.
reminder. Yeah. Sorry, what did you say?
It's that ultimate trust in God that
Yeah. Absolutely. And lest we think that there's not blood on the part of Abraham, we have his sign that he has of that he passes down, the blood of circumcision, that is the sign of the covenant, right? That literal reminder to the children of Abraham that God has made this promise with us, and it draws blood out of them to remind them of their promise. That we see blood, the Passover, right? The blood smeared over the door frame that is the covenant of God, that is that promise. And for us, it's not necessarily blood, but it's water. It's the water that we have smeared on our heads, and on our hearts. That the water with the word, that
yeah.
baptism is this reminder of this covenant, that you have a God who does impossible things. You have a God who loves you, who did not spare his only son, right? When he was in the instance of
Yeah.
Abraham and offering up his son, he did not provide a substitute for his son. His son, in fact, was the substitute for us. And
Yeah.
and that's, I think, one of the things that we can take away from this, that kind of reminds us that we are a part of this covenant as well, right? We're not Israelites. To quote Dr. Okamoto, we read the Bible like a loser. But still, there's that promise, right? And that promise comes to us too.
Because and I'm just gonna bring us back to the stars.
Yeah.
Those stars were numbered for you and me,
Mm-hmm.
for everyone who believes. So yeah, we read the Bible as a loser. That's our first lens, but the Bible is also for us,
For us.
for you
Yeah.
and and
So let's talk about you and I. Let's talk about what this text tells us about ourselves. I think we kind of alluded to it, but we should explicitly address the question,
yeah.
and answer, what does this tell us about us?
Yeah, I mean, well, it tells us that when we do have doubts, because we will, even pastors like you and I.
Yeah, right.
I mean, well, I want to throw that out there in case anyone is surprised that uh, we sin too.
Lest you think we're blameless, we also fall short of the glory of God.
Uh, but for when we doubt, we can look back at the promises that God has made,
Right.
that He made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promise He made to David, to Adam and Eve, knowing that those promises, though directed at those individuals,
Hmm.
apply to us as well.
Right. And that's the thing, is that we're part of this.
Mhm.
And it makes um it always reminds me, when I'm reading through this, we most often make this connection in Job, but I think it applies here. I might be misremembering the exact quote, um, in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when they go to meet Aslan for the first time, and I don't
Mhm.
remember which of the children it is asked, is he safe? And they're told, no, my dear, he's not
He's,
safe, but he is good. And that's the
he,
thing, is it, thank you. It is, I thought it was Susan, but I wasn't 100% sure that we have a God who yeah, maybe not be, he's the creator of the universe. He hung the stars. He knows how many there are, right?
yeah,
He's not safe. He's not safe, yet he's intimate and personable and there for us. And that brings me great comfort. And uh, so let's talk about our feelings. Um,
okay.
I would joke about us being Lutherans and Germans and not doing that, but you and I talk about our feelings quite a lot. So
We do.
uh,
We do. Well, I'm not German.
that's true. That's the
I'm
catch.
I'm Irish, and so I feel very deeply, very passionately, very strongly. And sometimes I feel like you Germans need to get in touch with your emotions a little bit.
That's fair. So what does this
Uh,
text make you feel then, since you're going to put us on blast here?
that's right. It just gives me this feeling of peace and comfort
Mm-hmm.
that well and that that God's faithful to us, even when
Yeah,
we're faithful to Him.
yeah,
Uh, that that we're part of the promise that he's kept this promise to Abraham that his offspring will number the stars.
yeah.
And he's continuing to make that to fulfill that promise. And
Mm-hmm.
just I just
For
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's it. Just for me, it makes me feel. This is going to sound weird. It makes me feel small, but
mhm.
not in the bad way. That
Yes.
it puts my problems in perspective, not in perspective for me, because
Mhm.
they're still too big for me to handle, but they put them in perspective to our God, who is
Yes.
bigger, right? Who is stronger? The Veggie Tales. God's bigger than the boogeyman.
Mhm.
But that's
Bigger
true.
than Godzilla and the monsters on TV.
Yeah. Uh, but now I'm just thinking about how I missed out on seeing Godzilla -1 in theaters. But
Yeah,
uh,
I need to see that so
uh,
bad.
I'm gonna see it when it comes out in black and white in theaters. It's fine. But sorry, this is gonna date the episode when we recorded it. If that's okay. But that God is bigger than our problems,
Yeah.
right? And our problems that are too big for us, right? I relate to Abraham in this, right? Especially the
Mhm.
childlessness aspect, right?
Yeah.
Not to get like too personal, but like I relate to that. I understand exactly his frustration, his arguing with God about that, and his
Mhm.
like, God, you told me that you love me, and yet this one thing is not happening, and that's a problem that's too big for Abraham. It's a problem too big for me, but it's not a problem too big for God.
Yeah.
And that reminder that God does impossible things is so comforting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna actually move us into number 10,
Oh, do it.
because it loops back in. It all
Yeah.
connects back. Uh, we've been talking a lot about verses 2 through 6.
Mm-hmm.
You know what we've ignored that I think
Verse one.
most people do? Yeah, verse 1. And
The
what
one where the other thing that God says to Abraham. Yeah.
fear not, I am your shield, and your reward shall be very great. These are God's first words in this text. Fear
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. And that's such a, such a beautiful thing that our God says, right? That he doesn't want fear.
Yeah.
he wants you to he wants there to be peace and comfort, right? Uh, and not that he does things to make us comfortable or anything like that, but he doesn't want us to be intimidated by him. And you think about the Lord's Prayer, right? You know, it starts with Our Father who art in heaven. As children ask their dear Father, so too we ask these things.
Yeah.
That he invites us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your reward shall be great. Our reward is great too. Our reward that is in Christ, that is given through faith. It blurred it out. I could unblur my background, but then you'd all see the disaster that's going on behind me. So we'll just pretend it didn't. That is given by faith. That
Mm-hmm.
our reward is the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions that remain that you've got, or any other insights to make before we wrap up?
I mean, we could sit here and talk for
I
the
know.
2 hours, 10 days, just about these six verses. But I think that we've really gotten delved in and gotten these beautiful promises, these promises that are more precious than jewels that we can hold on
Mm-hmm.
to.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that for now, I don't have much more to ask.
Get back to me in about an hour, and I'll think of something. I'm sure, but
Uh,
I I'm there with you. That's one of the things. I hope everyone's been enjoying and gaining stuff from this series. But I'll be honest, this is not altruistic. This is a way for me to learn and get just as much out of it, if not
and
more, because it forces me into that depth of study that we could just, and verses that we sometimes skip over,
yeah,
and verses that are and you get that other insight. And I love being able to do that, and I love being able to share that with everybody. And I really do hope that others are getting stuff from this. But that being said, I
you know what I really liked about this process, this sort of like cycle of questions is that anybody can do it.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm you know
it doesn't require uh being a pastor to do that. This is something that you can do in your own study, and it's been so great. Even in our nightly devotions that Sarah and I do, I find myself thinking through these questions as I'm reading or as she's reading,
yeah,
and it's kind of one of those things you can't turn off. It's once you do it, you can't turn it off, and it's been so great for that. But enough cheap plugs. If you're watching this, you don't need the cheap plugs. Anything that you want to say before we sign off here?
uh I just pray that everyone is safe. I know here in Illinois we've had some just dangerously extreme temperatures.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how it is over in Ohio. This
It
again is going to date this video,
It
but
is, yeah, I was going to say it is right now 20 degrees. So it's the warmest it's been in a couple of days.
yeah,
Uh, Gust of 31 miles an hour, feels like 5 degrees outside. So it's balmy out here, but I'm sure looking at the forecast, it'll change, but that's okay. That's life in the Midwest.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I just want to
and
pray for
hopefully you're
safe.
watching this when it goes up, but maybe you can revisit and you can laugh at all of this when you're complaining about the heat. Whoever's watching this, if you're watching it in the summer, you'll laugh about us complaining about the cold, but that's okay. It is what it is. Hope everyone got something out of this discussion. I really do pray for your blessings. Remember the promises made to Abraham are made to you, that you are a descendant of the Most High God. You are a child of the promise, and that the covenant that was cut for you in Christ's blood on the cross, that is your assurance. That is your thing. That is for you. Go in peace and serve the Lord. Thanks be
Man,
to God.